approach, systemic approach, which means introducing it at schools, at education system. What NGOs can do, what all of us can do, it's important, but in the end of the day, it has to go to the school. And I think UNESCO has the best expertise and the mandate to do that. And thanks to a project supported by UNESCO, implemented by UNESCO, but supported by European Union, and I have to thank Kester is here. Andres, thanks again. We were able to pilot the curricula, meal curricula at 20 Albanian primary and secondary schools to train 200, to draft the curricula, first of all, to discuss it with teachers, with experts. We had a good cooperation of the Ministry of Education, especially the Agency for Curricula. And now we were able to train 240 teachers, you know. And it was I believe it was a good story. And now we are trying that next year we go national, which means we train all the trainers and then we move national. Because and we see a great interest by both teachers and kids at school. This is an important level to be addressed, primary and secondary schools. But we are addressing it at another level, which is universities. We cannot bring back to gymnasium or primary school students of today. Yeah. And we are working with an experimental, I have to say, model of media literacy in non-journalism departments, from agriculture to law, from biology to medicine. And I remember when I went to talk to the Dean of Biology, he said, sorry, but we are not journalism, Ramzi. We are friends in school, but why are you asking this? I said, because actually most of the fake news and disinformations are coming from your field today. Yeah, he said, good. And this has been supported by US government. So Shannon, I will not forget your support also. And another level is the wider public. There is a project called Resilience, I see Tihomir there, which is addressing kids at schools, addressing different strata of society. This is the third level, and the fourth level, which I am not going to talk about, but John mentioned it very well, is the training of journalists themselves on disinformation, on media literacy for them, in special programs. So these four levels, from primary, secondary schools to universities to wider public, which is very important, and to journalism itself, I think means addressing it. Addressing the media literacy in a, how to say, in frontal way. You know, we are very much in early stages, very much behind, but in the end of the day, now we know that, you know, the long-term solution is invest on media literacy. So, thanks.
Thank you. Milica, media literacy, perhaps also in formal education in Montenegro, does that already play a role?
It does, but I actually, I kind of got inspiration to mention something. I find the issue of whether coexistence of democracy and internet is possible, I find it really disturbing, and I can't leave this without commenting that and trying to say something positive about that. I mean, we will have to find a way of coexistence. The one that doesn't survive will be democracy. So the internet will survive, for sure. And on a positive note, I think that European Union is actually doing something to try to help democracy survive through the recent regulations such as Digital Services Act, Digital Market, and also through the strengthened code of conduct, code of practice against disinformation. And I know that there is a lot of criticism around these documents, and I know that many things won't work and won't work in first couple of years, and that there will be changes, but I'm certain that this is the introduction to something that means regulating the digital space and actually protecting the democracy from negative effects of disinformation. And yeah, we are doing something with media. with traditional media. Many things are done with media literacy in schools. There is a lot of education, but what technology is now providing in terms of to disinformation side is a real danger, and that should be addressed. All of our findings are showing that actually social media are the key source of disinformation. And I want to take the chance while I'm here to say something that I constantly repeat. Here we have people from the countries that are aspirants to become EU members. We would really want to see these new policies being also implemented, shared with us in the Western Balkans. I constantly say to our European guests that we want this also to be part of the of negotiation framework. For you from like big countries, we don't exist for the big tech companies, like not just Montenegro being the smallest one, but any of our countries. We have zero negotiation position, and we can't discuss, we can't, I think, even reach out to them. So the only chance for us to have some things aligned here is actually to get the support from the European Union. I also know that these things, if they succeed, and they will eventually at European level, will naturally spread around the globe, because no big tech company will be able to say, you know what, we are adhering to high standards in the EU, but you in India, you can die. But I would like to see this neighborhood of European Union involved, because if we are waiting, we will come to the situation that we can't align anymore because things are developing so fast. We already witnessed that situation with the sanctions against Russian Federation in terms of media. For the EU, for the EU countries, it was easy task. You just switch off Sputnik website and Russia Today in English or German or whatever. Yeah. For us in the Western Balkans, it means, well, seriously going to the line of limiting freedom of speech, because local media actually transmitters of the Russian propaganda. So especially like in Serbia. So that's why I just not to go too far with this. I believe that in the Western Balkans we should also we should be more involved in this and allowed to learn, because everyone is now learning. So to try to learn why everyone still is learning, and not learn about that like in 10 years time, when the world will be probably a very different place.
Thank you very much. And of course, yes, the European Union does have this effect of scale and the leverage which many other countries don't have, and the power of standard setting, which then are adopted. There are many examples. John, you wanted to react to?
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on what I think was a crucial point made by Juliana earlier on, that journalists, of course, do make mistakes. We must admit to those mistakes, which we used not to do. I mean, the idea that we would correct things, I mean, there were, yes, corrections that often appear days or even weeks later down the bottom of perhaps a different page on which the error had appeared. And that now needs to become much more prominent. You know, we can't present ourselves to the public without admitting that what we do is imperfect. But having said that, I think that she went on to make an even more crucial point, which is there is a gulf of difference between honest mistakes and deliberate manipulation. And that's really what we are talking about. I think that what it comes back to is the point that I made earlier, which is that journalists now need to be more proactive. We need to be explaining more thoroughly to the public. And this is part of media literacy, I would argue, what exactly it is that we do. I was invited recently to a meeting of the American Business Circle in Rome. So a highly literate, highly educated audience. And in the course of talking about something else, I explained that when I write for The Economist, what I write passes through 7 filters before it appears in print. One of those is a fact checker, one is a lawyer, and the other are colleagues, for example, the foreign editor, the section head, et cetera, et cetera. People were astonished, utterly astonished. They have been brought up to see journalism as a reporter who types out a story and then it appears in print, because that's often the way that it's portrayed by Hollywood. One moment we have the journalist writing, and the next moment the presses are turning. We need, I think, and this is where we come back to journalists going to schools and so on, to explain to people at an early stage in their lives, it's not like that. Now, I'm not saying that all the media outlets in the Western Balkans can afford the kind of editorial structure that allows you the luxury of 7 filters. But you do check your facts. You do try to make it accurate. And that point, I think, is often missed on people who don't understand what it is that we do. And I think this proactivity is necessary because we're in an emergency. Democracy is in a crisis. If you go to Africa, for example, people don't want to become democratic. They look to China. They say that's the system that has worked out, authoritarianism. In many other places, there's a very high tolerance of, at least in theory and before it is actually imposed on them, illiberal democracy. And if I may end on a rather optimistic note, the one place that I do look at with some optimism is, strangely enough, the United States, where the midterm elections do seem to be offering some hope that people are sick of polarization. And that could give a wonderful opportunity, I think, to those such as the Danish and Norwegian speakers we heard from yesterday, talking about solution-oriented journalism and debate that is constructive. It's a straw in the wind for the moment, but perhaps those elections are telling us that some part of the tide is turning.
Well, hopefully. The 7 stages a Economist article passes through is probably, for most of us here in the room, me included, for the media I've been working for in my past life, is a distant dream. This is like a very, very well-off publication, of course. I remember very well at media I've worked on to discover on air a sentence, not coming from me, but some elections back in Italy, speaking of Berlusconi as the last bulwark against populism. And I thought, wow, this is going on there. Anyway, John, I have another short question, because zooming back to what you said initially now, of admitting errors on one side, which is probably a very, very powerful tool for people to get an insight like on how we're working. When we talked before this session, you also told me about the culture that is very present in the English-speaking media, and I'm speaking about the UK and the US, both of them, which is contrasting. Could you say a few words?
Yes, again, yes, that's, I think, about giving the journalist. Here we're now speaking about the area that one of the earlier speakers yesterday said was being neglected in all of our discussions, which is straightforward news reporting, which is still the basis and the bulk of the journalism that people consume. One of the things that, and I don't know what the traditions are in the Western Balkans, one of the things that vitiates Italian journalism is the lack of a habit of holding what people say to account. In good practice in Anglo-Saxon journalism, if a politician says something, you have an obligation to see if it matches the known facts, if those facts exist. Let me give you a concrete example. At a press conference, the then Prime Minister in Italy said that Italy had Europe's best secondary education system. Now, Italy does have a very good primary education system. It has a so-so secondary education system, and that is discernible through the PISA studies. They're easily available on the OECD website. But because there is this culture of respect for the other person's view in Italian society, these statements go uncontested, unchecked by the journalist. And it's left, in fact, to fact checkers who don't, frankly, have a very big role in Italian society or media to then hold the politician to account. The result is that basically, if you're an Italian politician, you can say any nonsense that you like, and it will be faithfully reproduced in the mainstream media the following day, with nobody adding that extra paragraph that says, according to the OECD, however, blah, 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 Italy ranks 16th out of 27 for secondary education. And I think that that is a very powerful tool in the journalist's armor to always see if what the politician is saying is actually correct. And if it isn't correct, or if it's not quite correct, putting in an extra paragraph that states those facts.
Thank you very much. Until now, we have been debating, and it went a bit back and forth between like the onus on the media to do something and the onus on society building proper skills for media literacy. I was saying media resilience. We have another 15 minutes, so I would open the questions, and there was a hand immediately in the middle there, the lady with the blue jacket.
Hi, my name is Samra Luchkin and I'm coming from Sarajevo. Thank you very much for this interesting panel. And I would like to say that I have always been more concerned over, not over Pinocchio, but about his friends, those who made him to do evil things. So Pinocchio got educated, he got changed, but these friends remain the same. So how we reach at the end of the day, that kind of young audience that remain out of this kind of intervention that we were mentioning at this panel. And I have two more very precise questions for the panel. The first one, when you mentioned the proactive act of journalism, does it include the maybe some new forms of traditional journalists and in order to develop new approaches? Does the proactive approach include developing of these new forms in order to respond to the young and more modern audiences? And the second is, you were mentioning the 7th stage of editing of the text within the newsroom. Bearing in mind the current situation, economic situation of the newsroom, what do you think, who should and what should replace these 7 people checking the text? Thank you.
Should we start from the last one? And this is, of course, one directly to you, John.
Yes. I didn't quite catch the word that you used. You said, given the I imagine financial situation that you find yourselves in, what can you do? I think there are very few journalistic organizations in which at least one filter is not possible. So I think that even if you have that, then you are able to say to people that what has gone into the paper has been checked before it appears. Given the need for speed, however, and this has become a real problem, I think, for journalism, and I can even feel it within The Economist, that we are being dragged into a system in which there is less checking because we just don't have the time in which to do it. This is one of the other pressures that we've not really spoken about, exerted by the internet. The fact that we have to get everything up there quickly. And that's where we also have a big disadvantage when compared to the manipulators, because they can dream things up a great deal faster than we can report things. So I think that we have to do that, but we also have to then, I think, look at the other side, which is the admission of mistakes. If, despite our checks, something appears which is not right, I think then the admission of the mistake becomes a kind of post-publication fact-checking. And if we find out that something is wrong, then we ought to be able to correct that very, very quickly. And I think that will win us friends. I think it will win us respect if we do that, certainly. The other questions that you raised, you said, I think probably I'm going to defer.
Maybe I would rather give the outreaching.
Yes.
Juliana is already
Jan,
raising her hand.
absolutely.
I also thought to
I agree.
play that to you.
Yes, I'd love to say something about that. Thank you so much.
I
It's a
can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Can you
No.
hear me now?
Yes, you have also a song displayed. No, yeah, now we can hear you.
But you can, okay, good. Thank God for that. So thank you for that question. It's a really excellent one. What is constructive journalism in this context? What can journalists do? What should they do? This is something that we think about quite a lot. And I think the following, I will go once again to the OECD and once again to Andreas Schleicher and tell you something that he has written multiple times, which I think is extremely striking. And he says, while 20th century learning was about the vertical transmission of facts from an older generation to a younger generation, 21st century learning is the act of, and I've written it down, really fascinating, the act of triangulating sources, evaluating the facts from those sources and building knowledge from that. That is 21st century learning. And if you think about it, that is what journalism does, right? We triangulate facts. We evaluate, or rather we triangulate the sources, we evaluate the facts, and from that we build the knowledge. And I would say that, you know, if you think of media as a public service, as I think the best journalists do, then the public service should expand from just being the news gathering to actually transmitting the skills of news gathering, so that children have an inbuilt sense that there are these 7 steps. They might not have the 7 steps always available, but they are aware that they themselves can do some of this, their own editing. It is a tall order, but it is actually something that can be done. We see the classrooms absolutely fascinated by this, because while we are, you know, we're biologically programmed not to like to be wrong. We don't want to be told we're wrong. This is one of the problems with fact checking, as important as it is. And I think fact checking has a tremendous role in its predictive possibilities and, you know, foreseeing trends of what is to come and actually bracing and protecting us in a preemptive way. But we're also programmed not to want to be hoodwinked. And so the response from the classrooms and from the children and from the teachers to basic tools is extremely enthusiastic. And I think what we need to do to really embed this, we also have to remember whatever we do is only as good as the political will to embed it and to keep it in there further. And we have to create political trophies, just like fact checking will create a wonderful headline, you know, under pressure from, I don't know, van der Leyen fact, Facebook triples its, adds 1,000 fact checkers and deletes 1 million posts. The shares of van der Leyen goes up, the shares of Facebook goes up. Everybody thinks the problem's solved, but it isn't really. And so we need to actually create something equivalent. What is it that we can, that policymakers and politicians can gain from higher levels of media literacy? And that's something that we really need to think about quite actively. And that's where I think impact analysis is important. In an ideal world, and I'll wrap up, I think in an ideal world, we would have a system whereby journalists are rotated and seconded into educational institutions, teacher training colleges and schools, long-term for a series of months, let's say, to really impart their knowledge slowly and gradually, and then to go circulate back into the newsroom and use everything that they've learned about their new audiences to really make their own content engaging and accessible.
A fully new role for journalists, basically. There is another question there, but while you're bringing the microphone there, Ramsey wanted to react immediately on that also.
Very briefly on Samra's very good question. We had Aidan White giving a talk for Albanian journalists, and my last question for him was, what's your advice for them? And he said, slow down. Actually, we have to go back to what's professional journalism. Can be narrative, can be constructive, can be I don't know what, but has to be journalism. And Aidan said, journalism is not about free speech. Internet is the free speech. Journalism is contained speech. John mentioned the word el rigore from Spanish, contained by rules and deontology. So we need to defend our profession. Personally, I've been always against what used to be called citizen journalism. There is not such a thing as citizen journalism. When we got sick, we don't go to a citizen doctor, we go to a professional doctor. We have to defend our profession and full stop.
Citizen doctor is a good one to keep in mind, indeed.
So mine is not question, actually, it's more comment based on the things that was talking these days. Is first that beyond that being in the crisis of disinformation, we are crisis of the concept as well, how we understand the democracy and also integrity. And I think that in here we need a lot to talk in this philosophical way. I mean, to have in journalism also to discuss about this concept, maybe to rediscuss about this concept, and is a time that we mostly need this more philosophical approach to having this. But beyond that, I think it's very important to mention here also language that we are using. And it was mentioned before, but talking for gender equality, that is not that mentioned in this during the time in the panels, how we are actually talking for the gender violence and how we are talking for the gender equality. We know in the region we are activist journalists who are talking about this. And just an example, when we are putting the hotlines, there is all the time the victim, the women, but not the perpetrator. And we need to have more feminist approach, editorial approach, and human rights approach. And I think that this is the mission of the journalists in this spirit. So just this short comment.
Any reaction to that?
Just on your very first point about democracy, I think that's a very interesting point. Whether democracy itself needs modernizing, and I come at this from an Italian standpoint, in that Italy has given birth to the Five-Star Movement. Now, this is an organization that it would actually deny that it is an organization which was born of the internet, but which has raised some very interesting questions about democracy. I think one of the things that older people do not understand is that the idea of only being able to make one choice every, let's say, 5 or 4 years in a world in which you can do so many other things with the click of a mouse is a very strange concept to younger people. And that we do need to look seriously at some of the ideas that that party or movement raised, and similar organizations in Germany and in Scandinavia have posed the same question. None of them really has had more than temporary success, but I think that they have raised some very valid questions about the extent to which we want to involve people in decision-making. And I think one of the reasons for the crisis in democracy globally is that people feel much less engaged than they would like to be.
There was one question there, the gentleman in the middle row, and further to the back afterwards.
Petri Saracini from IMA Institute from Skopje. I believe that all of us in the room would agree with this sentence that Ramsey quoted from Mr. Aidan White, that we need to slow down. We as a profession could agree, but what about the owners of the media? They force us to not to slow down, but to step up and not to make one piece a day, but 3 to 5 pieces a day, in conditions when the salaries have been lowered down, in conditions when, for example, national TV stations in North Macedonia used to have 40 to 50 journalists in the newsroom. Now they have 10 to 15, and they need to do the same work, and not only the work that they used to do, but also put something on Facebook, on Twitter, make a short video, make a streaming. So they are holding a microphone, the camera with the other hand, etc. In these conditions, we cannot expect for this struggle to be the struggle about quality, but it's a struggle about survival. My question to the panel is, how do we make the owners and perhaps the state do something more about protection of the labor rights of journalists? Because at the end, this is from where it starts. If you have good conditions to work, maybe you would be doing your job better. And we are not seeing efforts in this direction. And I think that when you have people working journalism that are struggling to survive and not to advance in their profession, at the end of the day, you get the quality of the content that you have, and you have ties and links with the owner and with politics, etc., etc. And this is, I think, one of the things that is damaging the profession and its capacity to counter disinformation. Thank you.
In its capacity, certainly, and also on the individual level, which drives many of us towards cynicism. Well, if that's what they want, we hammer out 5 stories a day. But Milica, you.
Well, I just wanted to say to this what I think we should all keep repeating, and us also not coming from the media, not being journalists. If the public interest journalism is a public good, then it needs public support. And I think that we should be insisting on public support and public funding because there is no other way to protect public interest journalism. And we will be, if we continue without that, we will be left with social media and, you know, showbiz entertainment news that can generate profit to fund the salaries of those that are writing.
Thank you very much. A last question, because we have reached the end of this session.
Helena Ibrahimbegovic, I come from Sarajevo. I would just like to make a statement or comment about the fact that you have mentioned about the Italian Prime Minister, that he said untruths during the press conference. Us in Bosnia and all of our colleagues in the region as well, we have many press conferences of politicians every day, and we face those things daily, and sometimes we have press conferences at the same time from different politicians. And I do agree that we have to check what they're saying. But for example, at the top of our country, one of our top leaders is always calling Bosniaks Muslims. And we know that's wrong, but he's doing that on a daily basis, actually. And as a colleague have mentioned, we have less and less journalists and more things to do, more work. So how to cope with that? We all know that he's saying things that are wrong all of them basically, especially in Bosnia. It's kind of, interesting situation in my country, but to like make comments in every text, that would be like, we would need at least 15 people just to do that, nothing else, just to like check what they're saying. Thank you.
Ramsey, Milica, maybe both you, because it's from the region here, but it's difficult if you're not practitioner, you as a journalist.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, this comes back to the same issue raised by the earlier questioner, which is a financial one. How do we get people to pay for journalism? Now, Milica talked about public funding, and I think that does have a role to play, but public funding can be a double-edged sword because it can bring with it political control. I think it feeds into another discourse, which is about how we get people to value that information and be willing to pay for it, which I realize is a damn sight more difficult in the Western Balkans than it is in, for example, the United States. What I would say is that in a number of areas, the owners of newspapers or the managers of newspapers have been exploring different models and have come up with quite successful answers to the question that we never imagined at the depth of the journalistic industrial crisis around about 10 years ago. What we've found is that, for example, The Guardian is a case where they've been able to stimulate voluntary contributions by their readers, because the readers have come to value both the approach of the newspaper, but also the quality of the journalism involved. But I'm not denying that the crisis exists, and the problems that you talk about are also felt in rich journalistic organizations like my own, where, again, we are under constant pressure to get stuff up quickly, and that inevitably means that from time to time it goes through with less filtering.
Thank you very much. We're just cutting down your coffee break, but Tiana convinced me for a short question.
Very short question.
Short answer.
Julian mentioned something called resistance or resilience to polarization, and I'm interested to hear what that is, because this is polarization has been mentioned, I think, in every panel that we had, and I'm always wondering, like, where's the line between stopping polarization and allowing like differences of opinions and ideologies that you're bound to have in a democratic society. So what does resilience to polarization looks like? What does that look like?
Again, I would like to turn to Milica or Ramsey, this time more. Yeah, Juliana.
Yes, I can say something briefly about that. So resilience to polarization is probably something very unattractive if you ask somebody like Berlusconi, and it is that rediscovering the curiosity for the messy middle. And this is what we try to do in our classroom visits, to really sensitize children to the fact that, there is more to be discovered when you leave your poles, when you leave your rigid opinions and actually go and seek out some facts. And the facts in the middle are often far more intriguing and complicated than you imagine. But I have to say that, resilience to polarization is really also going to rest with something that Milica brought up, which is the regulation that's coming out of Brussels, and that is the preference algorithms. We are being made into polarized people. I probably am as well, because I only get one type of news, or at least not as varied a kind of news as I might have done in the past. And that is really the answer, is that we've got to break out of these algorithms, and we've got to call the large online platforms to account to change those algorithms. They can, we know they can, and we just have to make sure that they do, so that we can look out of our little silos and find our way back to one another.
Juliana, thank you very much, and which points also to a follow-up debate, which we could have perhaps another moment on algorithm literacy, actually. But I would like to conclude this debate here. Please give a very warm, short applause to our excellent speakers. And thank you very much for the questions. There's one logistical detail I have to say, which is, if you haven't done so yet, sign the list for your presence today, and we see us back in now 22 minutes at 11:30 for the next round. Thank you very much.
Hola. Does that mean?
I love this line of the doctor. For either
question mark. Anyway, okay, I'll just kick off. I would say a very warm welcome to this fourth and last panel, just before a very, very, very important logistical announcement for all those who have a plane leaving between 3 and 4. There is transport waiting already outside. There are 2 buses bringing you to the airport, and there are already lunch packets in the bus. So you don't need to worry if you will manage to eat something before you get out of here. And we also will aim to conclude this panel by 12:25, 12:30, in order just to take the urgency out of it, which means that you are able to first listen to this entire debate, and second, still eat something, and third, still be able to get your plane for those who are traveling. Anyway, this fifth and last panel is about collaborative approaches as a key, I'm reading the full title out, as a key to increase sustainability of independent media and its improved quality. And I very much like how the end of the previous debate all very naturally already pointed to this one, because the question that was raised in several questions, or the subtext of several questions, was, of course, like, to what extent, if we journalists are fighting for survival as journalists, at least as media, to what extent it can be expected of us to save the world. So this panel is rather about, well, how to save the media first in order to make them able to save the world. I'm using very, very big sentences now to make it more interesting, because I know everybody is tired by now. And so anyway, to save human resources and build reciprocally on respective strengths, independent media outlets could really, really, really benefit from cooperation networks for putting together, for example, this has already been mentioned in previous debates, fact-checking capacities, but also, and that's another point which is often overlooked, very practical and down-to-earth things like IT services, bookkeeping, because you can't run a company today without high-quality IT services and bookkeeping, of course. But this stuff costs money, and small outlets, of course, don't always have it. Hence the idea, can this stuff be changed too? That's another point we'll be speaking about today. And there is basically behind this idea, cooperate or disappear or be captured by local authorities. Let me quickly introduce the speakers. Svetlana Kojankovic from the Common Voice for Media Freedom from Serbia. We have Christina Lee, Tina, from Hostwriter, but also the editor-in-chief of a website called Unbiased the News. We have Slobodan Golubovic from the Association Center for Media Development, and I checked all the names, I trained them, but my brain doesn't function anymore. From the Association Center for Media Development and Anna Andersis, and also the online magazine Journal from Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we have Anna Petrusheva, the country director of Bern from North Macedonia. Now, I would say we start the same way we did in the previous panels, which is not formal sort of opening statements, but I give you the word for a bit of introduction, what you're doing, what your activities and your projects, how they are connected to what we're debating here. And now, Svetlana, collaborative approaches seem to already be in the name, the Common Voice.
Yes.
So could you develop a bit?
Well, I'm very glad to see all of you, and I'm really glad that I have a chance to say something about our experience. And I have noted some important topics last night, because I think that we have to speak as fast as we can today.
Well, don't
Well,
speak too fast. Let's
as-
rather let's do it the normal debate. We
Yeah.
speak at our normal speed, because otherwise we're just like running
I
crazy.
think not now.
We will not be
Well,
able to mention everything.
Nobody wants to leave the plane. Well, media reforms in Serbia have been going on for 15 years. The more we try to reduce the chaos in this segment of society, the greater it becomes. The more we try to increase media pluralism, the less it is. The more we fight for the public interest in the sphere of information, the less it is too. And the more we point out the need for citizens to be in the center of attention, the greater media representation of the executive power. My impression is that is more difficult now than in 90s. And believe me, I remember the time very well. And here is why. Pressure are daily, especially in local areas. And not only from politicians, but also from economic corporations that deal with corruption, as well as from regime media, because they see us like enemy. In economic sense, local media are in more difficult position, I mean, than mainstream media. There is more and more work. I can remind you on COVID period, for example, and less employees. So it is not uncommon that the newsrooms have only 1 or 2 journalists to work. I will not speak about co-financing or media projects for public finances. I believe that all of you know about that and the problem without that. But finally, very important, the quality of media content is declining and the pluralism of media content is almost neglected. So what have we done? We believe that traditional media, civil society media and citizens can defend the front of media freedom and media pluralism through joint activities. So we founded a informal coalition named Common Voice for Media Freedom and try to do together. What have we done? We produced more than 200 media content and published on all media platforms together. When I say all media platforms, I mean web portals, radio, TV station, and weekly newspaper, as well as more than 20 networks. Sorry, I blocked. So later I will speak about our result, but it was a pilot project. We didn't have any experience, but we knew that alone we can't do anything and that we have to find new models to work together to improve public information, to improve our contents, and to improve our, of course, newsrooms. It is very important for us. Well, it's it for beginning.
Svetlana, thank you so much. Anna, when we have been talking before this session, we haven't talked so much about sharing like practical things, but about common standards. Could you develop a bit? And there should have been a micro on their side. Okay.
Okay, so yeah. Okay, so I'm coming obviously from the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network, and this is a network that kind of started small from what we then recognized as a genuine need, because, you know, similar societies, similar problems, operating in an atmosphere where, you know, you see that there are no borders for organized crime and corruption and other things we are reporting on.
And for information.
Exactly. So we sort of thought that we should do this organization and that will sort of marry international standards with local knowledge. And we thought, that was sort of our guiding principle, that this would be a winning combination of sorts. And in that sense, that's been going on since 2004, 2005. So almost 20 years. But what we've done in the meantime is that we've made sure that we have standards that go across, and always what was most important for us have been, professional standards. And in this current context and in this current situation, and we were talking a lot about how throughout this conference, how, distribution channels for media are now sort of under question with the social media taking over. That has been the thing that distinguishes you as a niche quality product. And it also, I think, as well, in a situation where audiences in each society or local media have been giving a much more limited picture, and it never goes beyond borders. It is far better to offer, to offer the broader picture, the broader context, see how things are handled in different countries. And especially when it comes to investigative journalism, it's very important. And we've discovered that, what's been going on in the Balkans has not been unique, of course, in the Balkans as well. And we have expanded to Central Europe as well. And I'll just give you one example. For instance, we've been investigating the entry of various Hungarian companies in the taking over Macedonian media. And because we've had, relationships, and we've been working with journalists in Hungary, it's been, much easier to do a proper investigation that then has an impact in both countries, if you will. So in that sense, I think that what is the most important is quality journalism and abiding to high international standards, because that is what makes the difference. And if you want to look at, for instance, what's been revolutionary, as in projects that the ICIJ has been handling, as Pandora Papers, Panama Papers, and so on. What is the common thread there? That you have a collaboration of highly professional media. You don't have tabloids, you don't have, kind of dodgy ownership media, but you have media which have made a commitment, an agreement that they will use the same methodology, the same professional standards to do a product that, audiences can trust.
Yes, and very clearly also in admission that even high quality, even quite well-funded, comparatively high-funded, well-funded quality medias of Western countries are not always able to have the resources necessary to, for example, the investigations to carry them out themselves. You should see how, like, The Guardian, Der Spiegel, Le Monde are working on these projects together. Sometimes the task is just too enormous to do this at one single media. So this is for very big companies teaming up, and this is of course more true for smaller ones. But I would, staying in the region, just a little bit smaller, global, and you are very much cooperating between Serbia and Montenegro, of course.
We have cooperative in Bosnia primarily. Our association, Center for Media Development and Analysis, is the founder of online magazine Journal, the first anti-corruption magazine in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Pratimo Tendere portal. On English, we follow tenders. The first portal who monitoring risks in public procurement. we have a lot experience in cooperation with our partners in Bosnia and Herzegovina and in the Western Balkans, primarily Serbia and Montenegro. We have about 10 years experience in networking with small and medium-sized media. Now we are implementing investigative journalism program who support 13 non-profit media in Bosnia and Herzegovina. That is a program supported by USAID. The media have support for production and have support for have legal support in cases of defamation lawsuit.
Very important point, the legal support also.
Our online magazine journal is the leader of this network. And many of our partners media is there today. There are numerous journalistic awards that have been given to journalists from Journal magazine and our partner media. We witnessed one such award yesterday. With support of BIMAP Forward, founder of umbrella non-profit media organization as need this 13 media. Umbrella will represent a kind of media hub with the aim of helping small and medium-sized media in their Umbrella is a research center for that media.
Congratulations for the award and
thank you.
Keep up the good job. Tina, when I heard about Hostwriter and went on your website and spoke to you, I thought, how could independent journalism have ever existed without such an organization? Tell us a bit about it. I think you have a presentation, right?
I decided to not.
Okay.
I'll just tell you guys about it. Yeah, thank you guys so much for inviting me to Tirana. Our organization, Hostwriter, is open for all journalists to join. And it was founded on the principle that there's a lot of inequality in journalism right now. One of the biggest forms of inequality, I'm sure all of you, we've been talking about these financial pressures, is that bigger organizations, big media outlets, they can afford to send people abroad